Hey, why not prepare a sermon and get up in front of everyone and try to talk about it? That'd be a good way to calm down. Um, so, but really, the topic that I'm going to be talking about today, the title that I've given it is God Desires Passion, um, and it really stems from kind of a desire that I have, but it's also kind of a conundrum that I've been facing, and that's how do I improve my relationships with people? How do I improve my relationship with my wife, with my family, with God, and with Christ Church? So I find myself, I'm 35. I'm old enough that I've made some pretty dumb mistakes in my life when I was younger. I'm also old enough that I'm starting to face that the things that I do now, the things that I pursue now, the things that I'm interested in and that motivate me will have a greater lasting effect on the rest of my life. And it always reminds me of my dad. He would, I can remember when I was younger, he would sit down and he'd ask us to talk with him. And that was already kind of annoying because my dad never stopped talking once he started. But he'd always start his stories with 30 years ago, and that was his way of going back to when he first became a Christian. And to hear him tell it, he would go back and he would say 30 years ago, he sat down and he wasn't really thinking about eternity. He wasn't thinking about paradise. He wasn't thinking about the sin that was in his life. He wasn't thinking about all of those kind of things. His main interest was, how can I be a good person? How can I be a good husband? How can I be a good father? How can I have a positive impact on people in my life? And does God have some sort of direction for that in my life? And how do I get from the point that I'm at now to one day when I'm old and I don't know, I always picture myself sitting in a rocking chair for some reason. But when I'm sitting in a rocking chair reflecting on my life, how do I get to that point and look back and look at myself with pride in the stuff that I did, the way that I acted as a husband, the kind of father that I want to be. So I decided to talk about passion. And it's not an easy topic to talk about. I kind of, up front, how do I talk about passion to people that are half my age? Some of you are less than half my age, and there's people in this room that are twice my age. So how do I present something like passion that's applicable to that wide of a range of ages? Which that was a difficulty. So I kind of hoping throughout the presenting this that I'll show you things that I think we can all take away no matter what age that you're at. I always like to go back to Ecclesiastes. That's one of my favorite books. And when he's describing a lot of things in life, he describes it as grasping for wind. And I was thinking about passion, and I was like, well, if someone came up to me and said, how do you describe passion? Or how do you grasp for wind? I'd be like, well, when you grasp for wind, I'd reach out and I'd grab it, right? And someone would be like, well, how much wind do you have in your hand? And I would open it up and I'd be like, I don't know, I have that much. The same thing is with passion or with ideas like love. If someone took something that I asked me about I was passionate about, I was like, well, yeah, how passionate are you about that? And I was like, I don't know, I could show you the things that motivate me to act in certain ways. Usually things like passion and love, the concepts themselves are difficult, and a lot of times we'll equate those with the way that they exhibit themselves in our life. So if I'm passionate about food, I might learn how to cook. If I'm passionate about sports, which I'm not, I don't understand that passion, but if you are passionate about sports, how do you explain that passion? You can say, oh, well, I learn all the stats, or I learn all the ingredients, and I read all these books on it, and I watch all these shows on television. And that's what your passion causes you to do, but it still leaves kind of a weird area of describing what that passion is and how do you describe that feeling inside of you. So I sent out a survey to the congregation. I got some responses, and that's good. And there's, like I said, there's a wide range of people, not just with genders, but with life experiences and with age. And there's, according to those responses, different people talk and think about different things regarding passion. So I thought I'd start out with just kind of an overall of some of the responses I got combined with what I thought passion is typically described as. So we'll see that if you look at like dictionary.com, for instance, passion is described as any powerful or compelling emotion or feeling. really doesn't help define it that great. There's also strong physical or sexual desire. It's a little bit easier to grasp than just a powerful feeling. And also a strong enthusiasm. So when you say, what do you think of passion, usually the responses were somewhere along that spectrum. I also got some responses. There are biblical examples of passion. And again, these more describe the actions or what passion causes us to do and pursue. So in Isaiah 26:9 it says, "At night my soul longs for you. Indeed my spirit within me seeks you diligently. For when the earth experiences your judgments, the inhabitants of the world learns righteousness." So in Christianity, we typically think of a proper use of passion as for pursuing God, pursuing His words, focusing on those things, and having that earnest desire to be pleasing to God. There's also some verses in the Bible. I put up Galatians 5:24. That says, "Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires." So there's kind of that. You have a passion for God, or you have the fleshly passions, and those are generally things that you're like, well, you need to get those out of your life. The new man versus the old man, those sort of things. I found a good quote online, and it kind of explains why I have a sailboat in the background, so I'll show that now. So this is a quote by Alexander Pope, and he was a 18th century English poet. So his quote is, "On life's vast ocean diversely we sail, reason the card, but passion is the gale. Nor God alone in the still calm we find, he mounts the storm and walks upon the wind." And if you break down what's being said here, it's kind of the direction that I'd like to go with the talk tonight, or today. And that it's, life is kind of like a vast ocean, and if you take the metaphor further, that we're kind of like a sailboat that's just getting tossed around in the ocean. And the reason the card, I had to look that up because that didn't make sense to me what a card was, but it's a compass. That's what it's talking about, is a compass. So as you're this sailboat, imagine yourself in a sea, and you don't really know what to do or how to get someplace. And you've got this compass, which is reason, and that's kind of our logic, and that's the side of us that says, hey, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to pursue. It's not necessarily you feeling like you need to do something or feeling compelled to do something. It's just that part of your brain that says, hey, this is the right thing to do, this is the right thing to pursue. And then it says that passion is the gale. So if you imagine you have a sail, the gale would be the wind. So passion is that wind that fills our sails and pushes us in a certain direction. So you have the combination of reason, which is our compass. It tells us where to go. It tells us where we want to be headed. It tells us what we want to pursue. And then you have passion, and passion is what pushes you towards that. It's kind of like your motivation, or it's your desire to do something. And if you have one without the other, you kind of have a problem, right? So if you only have reason, if you only focus on reason, if you only focus on logic or the things that should be done, you're just a ship sitting in the ocean, dead in the water. You know where you want to go, but you have no way to get there. If you only have passion, then you're just pretty much taking you wherever the wind takes you, and you don't have that final destination in mind of where you want to get to go. The last part is what I really liked of this poem. And it speaks of God's role in passion and the way that he's given us passion. And it says that he's not, when I'm sitting there peaceful, obviously we experience God and we feel God in ways like that. But it really pictures him as he's there in the storms, he's there on the wind, he's behind the passion that we have, he's behind the places that we want to go. He gives us that sense of purpose and that sense of direction, and he's actively helping us get to where we want to go. And if the scripture reading I picked out, I liked it particularly because it's, sometimes when I think about God, I think about this kind of, it's hard to picture him, but you picture like almost like a Poseidon-sized character up on his throne in heaven, and he's got this huge muscular build, and he's sitting on his throne, he's got a big white beard, and he's just looking around and he's telling people what to do, and he's all-powerful and all-knowing, and he doesn't really have an interest, kind of like when you look at the gods in Greek mythology, that they don't have an active interest in what people are doing. That reading that we had, I believe that God does have a very vested interest in what we do, what we pursue, And he's really the one that I think when you read the Bible is telling you that these are the things that he wants you to value, these are the things that he wants you to know. So I picked out this verse from Psalms 139, and it says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways, for there is not a word of my tongue. But behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. You formed me in my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb." To me, that's just it's a comforting thought that God knows everything about us, that he's interested in everything about us, that he formed us, he designed us, he created us in his image. The things that we want, the things that we desire, the things that we struggle with, the difficulties in life, that he's there and he knows about those things, he cares about those things, and he has something that he wants for our life. So for the purposes of having some sort of direction of what to talk about, I probably procrastinated a little bit too much in putting the slides together, but I had been thinking about it for a long time. So for whatever thinking about a sermon topic counts for. And I tried to think about if there are two passions that motivate us. And again, that goes back to the different genders that we all have. There's male, females, and we all know the stereotypes of how they are and how they interact with each other. The different ages, the different things that we're interested in. If you could take that diversity that we all have, and if you could boil it down to two things that I think God has put within us to motivate us, to give us passion, to kind of fill our sails with wind and push us in certain directions, what would those be? So the first one is a passion to know and be known. I think that's one of the key passions that God has given us that motivates us, that pushes forward in all of our interactions and our relationships. And the second is a passion for challenge. So I'll go through each of those in a little bit and explain that a little bit more. And one of the things through kind of research and reading, not just stuff in the Bible, but also some secular wisdom. I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts. I spend a lot of time looking at motivational quotes and motivational stories and stuff. And one of the things that it seems like there's a trend to place an overemphasis on feelings and emotions. And for me, my approach for passion isn't really a feeling or an emotion. And the reason for that is when you think about how you feel or what your emotions are like, that can change from day to day, that can change from hour to hour, that changes from week to week. There might be something that I feel or that I'm super emotional about right now, and you ask me about it in a week, and I was like, I don't even remember feeling that way or having that emotion. So if we rely on our feelings and our emotions to be that motivation and to help us pursue things, like that's going to fail. That's not something that's consistent. So how are these two passions something that we can leverage? How is it something that is consistent in our lives that no matter what you find yourself, if you're in a period of peace and relaxation and rest, I envy you, and that's a good place to be. But how can these passions be there for you if you're in a period of struggle and difficult and challenge? How can these passions be something that changes your perspective on how to approach that and the place that you want to be? So I have all these notes. I don't even know if I'm going to need them all, but it's hard to keep track of them as you're going through them. I want to start out with the first passion, which is the passion to know and be known. It's kind of a weird slide, and I'll explain it in a second. So just through browsing the internet when I'm bored at night, I saw this example. I don't know if you can see it clearly. I've always wanted to use the laser pointer. But, so there's this big sphere, right, and it's filled with all these small dots. And each one of those dots represents the size of the Earth. And if you think of the size of the sun can hold roughly 1,300,000 Earths. That's how large the sun is. And it's hard to get that perspective when you just see it in the sky because you're like, oh, that's the size of a pepperoni. Like, that's not that big. But it's actually ginormous. And I researched it further, and the sun is actually, oh, there we go. The sun is actually not the largest star that we know of. There's stars that are hundreds times larger than the sun, to put that in perspective. And within our galaxy, there's only that limited amount of space. The sun makes up like 99% of the mass. But just to put it on the scale of how large what God created is, the Earth, as large as we think it is just a pinpoint compared to a lot of what's out there in the galaxy. And God created all of that. There was another kind of illustration that I liked, which explains why I brought an apple up here, in case any of you are wondering. So this is a little harder to explain, but I'll see if I can get it right. So if you were to take an apple, right, if you were to enlarge this apple to the size of the Earth, so if all of a sudden this apple became the size of the Earth as it is now, one atom inside of that apple would roughly be the size of what I'm holding in my hand now. And atoms aren't even the smallest things that we can measure. I'm not going to step out of my bounds and act like I know a ton about physics and quantum physics and stuff like that. I can't learn that much in a one-page article online. But it serves for me to put things into perspective that when God spoke the universe into existence, a lot of times we think of, he created animals and fish. And when you look at the size of what he created, the size of the known universe, I think it was estimated that we have our galaxy, and within our galaxy there's things that are that size that just kind of dwarf us in comparison. It was estimated at one point that there's 200 billion more galaxies like ours in the universe that they know of. And apparently that's been updated to somewhere, I think, around 2 trillion. So you take our galaxy and how big and how vast that is, and you multiply that times 2 trillion. And it boggles my mind that God took something and he spoke that into existence, that exists, and that something as small as an atom that makes up an atom that's floating around inside of us and makes up all of the matter that we see, that God spoke that into existence. And really when we talk, I bring this up for a specific reason. It may not seem like I'm just giving you like science facts for the fun of it. But in all of that power that he has, and all of that he created, and all that he's capable of doing, that he gave us a book. And I don't have a physical Bible because I carry it around on my phone, but pretend I'm holding up a Bible. He gave us a book, and in that book, he said, I did all of that, and all of that's great, and all of that shows my power. But he focuses on what I think are two main themes throughout the Bible that really kind of highlights the importance of us and the relationship and how God really views his creation. I think when you go through the Bible, that God really he just wants us to know him. He wants us to know his desires. He wants us to know his will and his plans. He wants to have a relationship with us. And with everything that he's created, that he saw his creation, man and women, and he said, I want you to know me. I already know you. I created you. I want you to know me. I want you to know the things I have planned for you. I want you to know how special you are, how much I loved you, that I've done all these things for you. And that he's also shown us that our desire to be known, our desire to feel important and to feel special and to be understood by something, that is found and it's perfected in knowing God and knowing what he's given us. So a couple of verses that relate to this passion of knowing and being known. Leviticus 26:12. I will also walk among you and be your God, and you shall be my people. Jeremiah, you will seek me, and you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity. Psalms 139. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. And 1 Corinthians 8. But whoever loves God is known by God. So primarily today, like I said, there's other directions you can take passion. I'm going to focus mostly on our relationships. I'm not going to talk about like what hobbies you enjoy. I'm not going to talk about what goals you have for like your house or your finances or anything like that. I think the primary thing to focus on that really brings us pleasure is the relationships that we have. So I'm going to start with, I put spouses and significant others. I don't want to alienate everybody, especially since we have a wide range of ages. So I put that. Mostly in the Bible you hear him talking about husbands and wives, right? The relationships that husbands and wives have. These are also important considerations for those of you that are going to be dating or are dating or picking someone that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, these are things to consider when you're looking at if that person is the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. In 1 Peter 3, he gives a couple of instructions to men and women specifically within marriage, but it also kind of highlights some of the things about men and women in general. And the first is, to the women, he says, "Let it be the hidden person of the heart with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious inside of God." And for men, he says, "Dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as the weaker vessel, and being heirs together with the grace of life." Which is kind of funny when you think about it. I mean, obviously God knew what he was doing when he created us, and he knew that women were different from men. And when he talks to the women, he says, "Let it be the hidden person of your heart." You notice to the men, he's not saying, "Hey, focus on your emotions." Like, he's not giving that direction to men. He's saying that the women have that hidden person of their heart that they want other people to know. They want to be known by people, specifically here their husband. And with men, they say, "Dwell with them in understanding." What is understanding? That's knowing something. That's spending your time with your wife, knowing what motivates her, knowing her emotions, and knowing that hidden person of her heart that God instructed her to focus on. We usually think like, okay, women are emotional and guys are like the fix-it type of creatures, that when there's a problem, women want to talk about how that problem makes them feel. Like, "Oh, well, I'm talking to somebody and they said something mean to me and this is the way it makes me feel." And then you talk to a guy about a problem he's having, he's like, "Well, can I Google it? Can I fix it? Can I figure out how to make that not a problem anymore?" One of the things that I've thought about and that I think has improved my relationship and my perspective on being married, I want to use makeup as an example. So Dana loves makeup. And we'll go to Ulta and we'll go to Sephora, and she'll go and she'll find the colors that she likes, and they call them palettes because there's multiple colors, and all the color combinations that you can use are amazing in the eyeshadow and stuff. And if you ask me, like, "Do you care about makeup?" I would say, "No, I don't care about makeup." Like it's not a power tool. It's not like a piece of wood that I can build something with. But focusing on knowing someone and them wanting to be known. I'll go into Ulta, into Sephora with Dana, and I get a kick out of spending that time with her and understanding that that's what she's into, and that those things that she focuses on that I can be a part of. And it's not so much that I want to know about makeup, because I don't want to know about makeup. It doesn't matter to me, but I want to know Dana, and I know deep within Dana is a desire to be known by me, and I know that's not a spiritual example, makeup, but it's just the best one that I could think of at the time, is that we spend that time knowing and being known by our spouses or by our potential spouses, which leads me into a discussion on communication. So if I asked you, anyone that's been married for a long time, what's the number one skill in your marriage, you'd probably say communication, right? And when we think about the purpose of communication with somebody else, it really boils down to you want two things. When I'm communicating with you, or when I'm communicating with Dana, or if I'm communicating with anybody, I want them to know something, and I want them to know me through what I'm telling them. I'm going to use Dana as another example. Sorry, you're getting most of my examples today. So when Dana comes in, she wants to talk to me about her emotions or her goals in the future, and these things that she wants that are bugging her and that she's been thinking about all day. She really wants two things. She wants for me to know how she feels and what she desires, and she wants to know how I feel and what I desire in my life. And typically my initial reaction will be when she's like, when I'm out in the garage, I'm doing something, she comes out. I don't think this has happened, but you see it on TV, so I'm going to, this hypothetical situation where I'm working in the garage and she comes out and says, "We need to talk." And my initial reaction is just to throw down the screwdriver and be like, "All right, something else I got to fix." But what's really helped me think about the trajectory of our relationship and our interactions with each other is it's not a problem that I have to fix. That's a chance for God gave me the desire to know things. He gave me the desire to be known by other people. and specifically within marriages and those intimate relationships, that he gave Dana that desire to know about me, and she gave her that desire to be known by me. And so those conversations, I'm trying to get less stressed out when she wants to talk about emotions and important things, and have that be something where I think, well, God gave both of us that desire, and while they exhibit themselves in different ways, that by focusing on that, something that God gave us both, that we can reach our goals in our marriage that way. The next one is relationships in God's family. And again, if you look at Philippians 2, which we've been studying on Wednesday nights, it says, "Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem each other's better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interest of others." And when you break down kind of what that verse is saying, is that what Christ wants for his church is for us to know each other through these things where I'm supposed to look at someone and elevate their needs before mine. That really takes me knowing somebody that I'm in this congregation with. If Dave Grunland needs something, if I don't know him, if I don't take the time to know him, if I don't speak to him, if any of you need something, if I don't know you, if I don't take time to speak to you, there's no way that I'm going to be able to fulfill this passage or what Christ wants in that passage. It also takes for us allowing others to know us. If I need something, if I'm struggling with something, if there's a challenge that I'm facing, if there's doubts that I have, if I just keep that all bouncing around inside my head throughout the week, there's no way any of you know that that's something I'm going through. That requires me letting you know me. So that was one of the areas I was thinking about. So marriage, the intimate relationships, and relationships in God's family. For me, the primary motivators, the primary thing to focus on with improving those relationships is that we focus on the person that we're interacting with, the person that God has given us, is that they're operating under the assumption that they want to know something and they want to be known, and that's how we meet each other's needs and reach the goals that we have. The next one is a passion for challenge that I'm going to address. I saw this image that I liked. It actually came from lyrics that I'd heard. It was that you see a mouse trap, I see free cheese and a challenge. And then I saw this image of a mouse wearing a helmet, so I was like, oh, I want to find a way to put that in a slide. So that'll be our intro into the challenge. And the reason why I picked a passion for challenge is because when you look at every single aspect of our life, God has made it, He's designed us, He's created us to benefit from challenges. If you think about our bodies, I know I don't look like it now, but I used to be pretty fit and work out, or Kelson doing sports and stuff. When you challenge yourself physically, that brings growth, that brings muscle growth, that brings health and wellness. As you age, it's more important to be active. God designed our bodies to need to be challenged in order to respond to that and grow. When you think about our minds, the way He designed our minds and our thoughts, that's designed to be challenged. If you just sit there and you're never challenged your brain, you don't form the connections that you need. And they've done multiple studies that as we age, challenging our brains and bodies, that's beneficial for our overall health and our well-being. Which is odd because God created us to be challenged and to grow from challenges and to reach those things that we want through being challenged. But if you're anything like me, I exert pretty much 90% of my effort trying not to be challenged. Most of my time and most of my thoughts are how can I make things easier, how can I make my life easier or avoid challenges. So there's some verses that I found in scriptures that revolve around the idea of being challenged. In Romans 5, and not only that, but we glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. And then in Proverbs, this is talking about being lazy and not working. It says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, so shall your poverty come like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. And then in Acts, when when Ananias is being instructed on how the purpose of him interacting with Paul. Paul pretty much starts out by telling his life is just going to be challenged. That's all it's going to be. That's Christ's purpose for him. But for I will show him the many things he must suffer for my name's sake. Paul's ministry, Paul's purpose, Paul's everything that we admire about Paul was a result of the challenges and the struggles that Paul endured for the cause of Christ. And then in Exodus, this is when the Lord was speaking with Moses. And it said, Moses responded to the Lord and said, "Please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." So initially when the Lord came to Moses' reaction was, I'm not good at talking. I don't want to be a leader. I don't have it inside of me to be a leader. And you all know the story of Moses. He went to lead the children of Israel out of bondage and through the wilderness. All of these verses point towards, and numerous stories, the story of King David, the story of most Old Testament stories, all the prophets, they all center around the idea of challenges, that God helping these people through challenges and the benefit that these people get through challenges. So how is this passion for challenge that I think God has given all of us, how is that displayed in our relationships? And this is one thing I was talking to Dana with, and it's do we value things that come easy or what we have through struggle and through challenge? And when we were talking about relationships, I'm like, well, think about all the relationships that are important to you. If you're married, think about your wife. If you're a parent, think about your children. Think about the challenges and the struggle that those relationships have presented in your life. Think about any relationship that you have, whether they're friendships or anything. If you value those, it's likely that those relationships have probably been the hardest for you, that they presented the most challenge. I think of people at work that don't challenge me, and they're okay people. I call them acquaintances. I don't call them friends. They're people that don't really push me, and it seems kind of at odds with each other. But the relationships that I have with you, the relationships I have with my family, with Dana, those all, I think, just by virtue of trying to deal with each other, sometimes that presents the challenges and the struggle. But in the end, those are the relationships that we value the most. In Ecclesiastes, and this was one of the ones through the survey that someone had brought up, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. There God's instructing us that whatever you do, accept that challenge and put as much effort in as you can for the benefit of that. And I also wanted to bring up the cross, and in Luke 22:42, there Jesus says, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me." And I started thinking about the value of the challenge of the cross, and that the passion that Jesus had to go through all of that, to face that challenge, the value in the cross and the value of a sacrifice. It wasn't because it was easy. It wasn't because it was something that came naturally to Jesus to want to do. In this verse, he specifically asked God, "Hey, I don't want to do this. It's not something that I think I can get through." And the scripture says that he was strengthened through that. But the victory of the cross was through this unimaginable physical, emotional, and mental challenge that Jesus went through. That through that, he was able to overcome sin and overcome death. And that, to me, is the pinnacle of the passion that God has given us for challenge, is seen through his Son and the life that his Son had led. And the reason I bring up the challenge is because it's, like I said, that's an area that I struggle with. I anticipate that a lot of you struggle with something similar to that. It's like when you're at work all day and you come home and it's like, I just want to eat pizza, I want to sit and watch TV. I look forward to not having that challenge, but then when I'm honest with myself, when I look back through my life, when I look back through the things that I have, the things that I value the most are the things that I have because of struggle and challenge. Your marriages are challenging. Our marriages are challenging. Raising kids is challenging. I haven't raised a kid, but I was a kid, and I know I made that challenging for my mom, so I can say that confidently. Being a child is challenging. I remember when we were in San Diego, Maddie wanted to bring in her iPad because she wanted to, while we were eating pancakes, she wanted to look on the internet. And Melissa's like, "What are you doing? You can't bring that in here. Take that iPad back to the car." And I was like, "Oh man, I forget how like hard it is to be a kid and just be told what to do all the time. It's not an easy challenge, but through that direction and instruction from your parents, you reach those things that you want." But God made those things challenging on purpose. And rather than spending our time trying to avoid those challenges, we realize that God made them challenging for a reason, that hopefully that changes our perspective when we are going through challenges and struggles, that God put that in our life for a purpose, and it's not something that we just put it on autopilot and hope to get through so that we can go back to being at rest and at ease. Is that He wants you to grow, He wants you to learn things, and He wants you to learn how to trust Him and rely on Him more. Yeah, I did have enough content for the sermon. So the takeaway, I have a couple of verses and a quote that I'd like to read. So in Galatians 6:9-10, it says, "And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all." And then in Proverbs, "A desire accomplished is sweet to the soul." And I found this quote that I liked from F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it said, "Life is essentially a cheat, and its conditions are those of defeat. The redeeming things are not happiness and pleasure, but the deeper satisfactions that come out of struggle." And I like that quote because, I mean, life does seem like a defeat sometimes. No matter how good things are going, we're all rushing inevitably to the grave. I know there's going to be a time where I'm more tired than I am now, that my body hurts more than it does now, that the motivation that I have to do things will be gone, that we're not here on earth in really a winning game. That's not the point. But the struggles and the deeper satisfaction come not from the easy things in life. Comes from knowing God, from knowing the people that we're with, from knowing our family, our spouses, knowing each of you here, and ultimately knowing God better. That's where the deeper satisfaction and struggle comes from. And so I know throughout the sermon I didn't really focus on salvation or our ultimate hope of heaven. And that wasn't the purpose of why I wanted to give the sermon. I find myself in a place where I need encouragement, and I need to shift my perspective and my thought on things to kind of get through some of the difficulties in life. And to me, God's greatest gift that He's given us through these passions is the ability to know Him and to have a relationship with Him, and that one day we'll return to Him, and that we'll understand and we'll be perfected, and we'll fully know and understand the things that He wants, and that will be the end to the challenge that we face here, was that reward with Him in heaven. So I hope if you're in a place where you're finding difficulty in relationships or with things that you want in your life, this will be some sort of encouragement to you. If you're not a Christian, I know typically when I hear other people like on podcasts speak about religion and Christianity, we kind of have this stigma of being people that don't enjoy things, that our main purpose is to say you can't do this, you can't do that, that all this stuff that seems like a good idea is bad. And a lot of people think that Christians just take the joy and pleasure out of life. For me, it's not about that. It's about increased passion and fulfillment through finding meanings of what we're doing and why we're here on earth, through knowing God and going through those challenges in life. If you are a Christian, if you're struggling, you don't have to come forward. I know that's usually, since I was young, that was what you're supposed to do, is come forward and have the congregation pray to you. You don't have to do that, but I would challenge you, I would encourage you to, if you are going through things, whether it's through a spouse, your family, or your family here, that you would open up to someone, that you would let them know you, and that you would get to know them better, and that we could help you in that way. If there's anything you need and you feel like you need the prayers of the church, if you're ready to become a Christian, you can do that now as we stand and sing.